Good morning, everybody. As Brian said, I'm from the National Audit Office, but my background, I don't know how much you know about the National Audit Office, but we're not part of government. We are there to look at how government spends money. And our focus in the past has been very much on government, central government, but now we're expanding our remit and we're going to start looking more, and we already have done, to start to look at local authorities. So from a holistic point of view, that now is starting to give us a much more broader view about what government's doing and what local authorities are doing and how that looks right across the landscape. My own role at the NEO, I joined the NEO a couple of years ago. The NEO is primarily made up of auditors, so a lot of the work we do is auditing the money that's being spent. But a lot of what the NEO do is looking for what government, public sector are doing in terms of value for money. So how are we spending the taxpayers' money? Is the taxpayer getting value for that? Hence my title. But actually, one of the things, I'm not an auditor, I've been brought into the NEO mostly now with this huge change going on around digital and the IT space. My job has been to, I and a few others, we've been brought into the NEO as specialists, so with already an understanding of this whole landscape, to look at how government's doing and what the progress is in this area. So my own background really, IT, digital, business change, senior roles, CIOs in other organisations. So for me, my starting point has been really interesting stuff going on everywhere in the private sector. I've also worked in government, so what's now happening is we are able to make a lot more sense of that. We've done quite a lot of work over the last couple of years. So what I just wanted really to do this morning is to talk a little bit about what government have been doing specifically in some areas, and for local authorities, how that can, what kind of read across is there, and what kind of things might be useful. So we're really starting off with the top bit is cost reductions. So we all know now in government, with government expenditure, the sums don't add up. And regardless who comes into government after the next election, those sums still don't add up. So austerity is not over, there's just not enough money. So this whole focus on cutting costs is going to remain. So one of the things in the digital, why it's so important for public sector, is digital now and digital services are seen as a way of being able to maintain the quality of the services, but at being able to do things, maintain the quality, but do them more cheaply. That's a huge driver now for digital. And that's been quite a focus around the areas in government that are starting to look at digital, a big focus on the citizen, but also the importance of understanding how things can be done differently to start reducing some costs and saving some money. So there's lots of other drivers, as you can see, public sector reform being a major part of that. But what it's causing now is a whole look with digital on the skills. So what new skills are we going to bring in to support this? What new skills do we need to develop in the public sector? I think one of the issues though, and it says here, the area then, as well as focusing on digital, is the joining up. So for local authorities, I know you've talked for years about how to join up, how to get better value by using what other areas in the local authorities are doing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I think listening to Brian, I thought it was really interesting, and you know, what he was saying about this now, this whole digital thing is huge, it's not going away, The advances in technology mean that all business people, all organisations need to take account of this and really understand how it can be exploited to make a big difference. So it's not going away, and as I said, if it's seen to be a really important area to reduce costs in the public sector, it's important to really focus on it. Now, Brian also talked a lot about GDS, and I'll talk a little bit about them as well when we talk about innovation. But our recent work then, we've looked at really, when we've looked across government, those 4 areas: innovation, skills, procurement, and the whole big data thing, and then the final point around integration. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of those to see what's been done in government and is there anything useful there that local authorities can use. So on the skills, I think as well, as Brian said, in fact, I love what Brian had to say because he's introduced a lot of what I'm going to say, and we didn't collaborate beforehand. But the whole thing about digital is it's not about IT. So whilst it's at the centre of it is all the advantages and the opportunities now for exploiting new technology, it's about business. It's about how the broader way that digital or IT can be applied to the way services and organisations work. So the skills, therefore, are needed. They're not just about let's get some better IT people in or people who understand digital or the new technology. It's about business leaders and those who run services really understanding and starting to apply that thinking, knowing what's now available to how they can start to do things differently. So those skills are needed right across the organisation, both at that senior level and at the services level. So everybody needs to get this and understand what it means. So the skills then in business transformation, really when we talk about digital, what we're now saying is to embrace digital means huge changes in business transformation. So those skills are going to be really important. They're always important, they're going to be even more important now going forward. I think Brian also talked about the service and supplier management bit. So this move towards in government and now local authorities away from, in the past, outsourcing huge amounts of intellectual capital, technical capital, business capital to big providers, and a lot of that has been lost internally in the public sector. So getting that back into the public sector, really important, and it's really important for this particular agenda. So I think I've got a question at the bottom there, and it says, what therefore is the new career path for digital? I haven't got an answer to that, but I think the important thing to say is for everybody, there's now a new strand to all roles that embrace digital. The procurement, I'm not going to talk too much about procurement, but the move away from big suppliers, from doing big things in central government has been really, it's been quite pivotal. The procurement processes have now been focused on doing smaller procurements, and even when there are large things to do, procuring it in small chunks. So, and the introduction then of catalogues and things like that to help facilitate small procurement has been really important. So government really trying to move away from, here's 2 years, because this is really complicated and it's going to cost a lot of money to put this contract in place to do this big stuff with a big organisation. So that has been completely taken off the table, and that is really important to start getting things done quickly. So that, just as a principle, has made a huge difference in government. But it's also brought in a number of its own challenges, and particularly now, I think we're going back to the skills thing. So managing suppliers then in smaller environments, knowing how to understand then internally to the organisation how they knit together, how they work together, what they need to do together, and being the intelligent customer. These are all things now the public sector has got to learn more in this particular environment. So what we now know, there are new suppliers also coming into this arena, like the cloud suppliers, and understanding how you buy those services. This is now with a lot of government departments, it's a new area, and they are looking at, okay, it's new, how do we integrate a cloud service, what are we looking for, what are the security requirements? So now that a lot of them have started to do that, there's the opportunity for across the broader public sector to understand what those issues are, what the challenges are, because it's new, and then other people to learn from that. So I think that's a really important area. Brian also talked about big data, and I think one of the things that's always been pretty weak, I think, in public sector or in government is around management information and business intelligence. And now, I think with big data coming on the horizon, it's upped the whole picture to say, you know, we were behind quite a lot in just getting basic management information. Now we all know there is so much data out there that is there to be used, manipulated, get us to understand how our services work, and lead us into then understanding how we make them work more efficiently. Now, again, this comes back to the skills. It's another new area, but in government, a lot of government departments now are really, they see the benefits of this. They can see quite clearly how a lot of these innovations can help their organisations. Now, again, in quite early stages, we've looked at some government departments, so HMRC have got now, they've been using more big data for the last couple of years, and other departments looking at it a little bit more in slower time. But this is another area that really needs a major focus going forward. I think integration... Oh, you are? Sorry. So you are. I think the final bit that I just wanted to talk about then was integration, and clearly this is a big issue for local authorities. It's a big issue for government, and it's also a big issue for health. So, but in its broader sense, the broader integration piece is also becoming really important. So this is seen to be a huge area for cost savings. The need for people and authorities now, the need to be more connected than ever is really knocking at the door. The availability now of things like cloud platforms to enable this to happen is starting to emerge. And in local authorities, I think we've got some good examples now of this kind of integration happening, and in government as well, particularly around things like shared services. So how can we set up something to share what we're doing in our back offices so we don't all have to set up finance systems that we need people to run? We can just use one that's already set up. But I think getting the model right for this is very tricky. It's something that you'll know in the public sector, people have been talking about this for a long time. It's really important for the citizen, it's really important for cost reduction. So, but a lot of the challenges are, and what we've seen in government, trying to do this, bringing in new solutions and then trying to integrate them across the piece with various legacy systems that belong to government departments. It's a very tricky area. So it needs a lot of focus. So what we actually did last year, we did a study and we looked to identify how well public sector identifies and implements opportunities to integrate public services. So we looked right across the piece in central government, local government and health. And as part of that study, we identified these 4 areas and types of integration. So the horizontal integration, you'll recognise that. That, for example, would be services, say, in geriatric care, so that would involve social services, health, and local authorities. So how do you get that horizontal integration? I think on the left, vertical integration, we're already very key in local authorities. So how do you join up things like refuse collection and recycling? I think the strategic integration, gov.uk, as Brian mentioned earlier, a really good example of strategically saying government are going to have one single website, we're going to build it centrally, we're going to build it in this strategic way, and then all the other government departments can use it, and that's the framework. And I think then the 4th one around back office integration, so again, these are the shared services and the ERP solutions. We actually looked as part of this case study at a number of integrated workings in local authorities, and which I'm not going to go through them, but it just gives you some indication of the work that is starting or has been underway in these areas. And if there's any opportunities there, if you're thinking about doing something similar, it's really worthwhile having a look at how these particular areas integrated what they were trying to do, and obviously the focus there on cost saving. So my final slide then is our findings then on integration and what we felt were the requirements to do this successfully. And this is where it knits really right back into the digital agenda. So it's really understanding at all levels in the organisation what the potential for value from doing that integration is. So who's got some good ideas about how that can be achieved? And that, as I said, driven by reducing costs, gives a kind of focus to the thinking about what's the priority here in terms of what we can integrate. The commitment, what we found is, whilst we were doing this particular piece of work, we found a lot of attempts to do integration that kind of fell by the wayside. And those that were really successful showed massive commitment to work in this integrated way. So that was at all levels in the organisation, those signs of commitment being at the board level, that shared vision and objectives for what they were trying to achieve in an integrated way, and the focus on the importance in that particular local authority of making this work. The implementation capability, and I guess this bit can't be underestimated, it's tricky, it's complex, and it's got risks, and quite often it's about applying new ways of doing things. So that needed to be really well supported, both in skills at all levels in that, but the planning and the understanding how to do that, really important. And I think the other areas, though, that where it's been successful now, I think that sustained focus on continuously improving was also evident. So in our report, we brought that out. So really, this whole thing about how do you get successful, high-value integration, it's all of those ingredients. So a difficult area, but a really important area. So I think, just in summary then, the whole digital, the new world of digital, the whole, you know, what is digital? That's the message really is for public sector. There are a number of things now that need to be done. They really can be pushed by digital, and the opportunities then for doing things in a different way. And also in government, it's now shown, again, with the kind of stuff that GDS is doing, they've shown now an attitude that starting to experiment and starting to do things differently is good. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Again, chance to, we've got some time to put some questions to Yvonne. In case there are still a few heavy-armed people from last night, I'll give you a couple of minutes more to think of questions, and I'll just pose an initial question to Yvonne, if I may, just to kick it off. One of your slides there, Yvonne, listed a number of cost savings that have been made among some of the examples that you looked at. And you made a point at the start that the role of the National Audit Office is changing to be not just auditing cost savings, but to looking at value for money. Again, you know, you could make an argument that in some cases the right thing to do in a process of digital change is not necessarily going to be the one that's going to deliver the most cost savings.
Yeah.
How would you position, you know, the obviously the people here do have to do to make cost savings because of austerity, but equally a lot of that change, if you're looking at it from a value for money perspective, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cost less.
I think that's completely right. One of the things that, so whilst we've got two sides at the NAO, one looking at the financial audit elements, but the other one looking at value for money, to date, a lot of our value for money reports have been around looking at things in government in particular that have gone badly, and then writing a report which said, this went really badly, didn't it? And here's the evidence, and this wasn't good value for money. So, but one of the things as part of our role, that given that we want to improve the way that the taxpayers' money is spent, we've broadened our remit slightly to say we do need to do that. We still need to scrutinise those kind of areas. But what we also want to do is have some influence on how things are done early on. And so therefore, we've got a number of other things now, rather than doing big published reports which conclude on whether things were value for money or not. We have looked at a number of initiatives with different departments and then commented back to them on what they're doing in the early stages. So, with the digital agenda and the kind of experiments that have gone on, we've really looked at those in that way. So we understand the agenda, we understand the big picture where government is trying to get to, and what we've looked in those areas where it's innovation, and innovation meaning that sometimes things will fail, and sometimes you spend money, but you learn a lot from whatever it is you've done, which feeds into the next thing that you do. So we understand that picture. So we don't look at everything from, we're going to look at this and decide, in this piece of innovation that you've done, was it value for money or not? So and in any case, we try to, when we're looking at the bigger things, we've looked at the bigger picture of what's been going on in government in the innovation space, and how they've done it. And our comments really have been on how have government departments engaged with that, and how have they responded. And I think the important thing to say on that is, it's the fact that government is experimenting. This is really high on the agenda in all departments, and at all kinds of levels, the response to that has been good. So we would say, good early start on trying to get innovation and new skills in.
Okay, that's fine. Questions from the floor then? Who'd like to put a question to your auditor? Gentleman at the front. You got the mics here?
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Jeff Forrest from Keynote. Really interested that you're focusing so heavily on the integration requirement in all of this. One other aspect of that, I suppose it's at the back office level, is we're seeing with the disaggregation of these big contracts and people bringing things back in-house, it also means that they may be going to multiple suppliers for elements of the overall solution, whereas before they just handed it completely to a third party. That imposes a new integration challenge in making sure that those components are brought together into a coherent single service level that they were probably experiencing before. I just wondered whether you're tracking that and seeing any consequences of that kind of disaggregation.
Yeah, I think, so the point being that we absolutely see that the big suppliers have done largely invisibly, but their job of integrating what goes on behind the scenes, both at the technical platform level, at the software level, that has been largely invisible in government departments, and it's still very early days for a lot of the departments in terms of really understanding the significance of a change in that environment. So our discussions, and really we will have these kind of discussions with departments at this level, and they would be centred much more around, have you really now understood the service or the new service that you're trying to deliver, the skills that you need in-house and to deliver all of this, and the need to put everything in place before new contracts are let. So it's not really, the contracts now are just the end game. It's all about understanding exactly what's required in this job of service integration, systems integration, desktop integration, or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, I think we see it's a really important area for departments to start focus on, really understanding the implications. And that is starting to happen, and I think this, for me, I think it opens up the door a little bit more for people to understand a lot better what is involved in this whole area, because it's been quite a nice black box to everybody for the past how many years, and I think that whole understanding of the complexity of this area has been lost. So I think it's good from that point of view.
There's a technical integration there, which is one thing, but there's a service integration there, and it has to be a bit more than inviting all the various suppliers to play nicely together.
Absolutely. So, and that's our starting point. So what we're saying is, and the discussions with department is, do you understand now, this is part of the intelligent client function, how this service needs to work in this new way. So yeah, absolutely, that comes first, the technical integration then underneath, and then the contracts that you need to put in place to support all of that.
Is the gentleman over there?
Thank you, Yvonne, for a good presentation. I'm David Clayton from the Socitm board. I'm a non-exec member with responsibility for the third sector. And my question's about the third sector. I can appreciate it's difficult enough trying to get value for money from central government and then local government and then between local government agencies. But actually, I think much of the literature that's coming out says the third sector and other sector involvement is perhaps key to getting value for money. I appreciate it's difficult to do so, but I wonder where that fits in with your plans. Does your brief extend to reviewing the strategic integration of services and activity across the whole civic piece?
Yes, the answer is it does. So in our work then, particularly with local authorities, third sector clearly really critical in this area. But from the NAO point of view, we've, as I said, this is relatively new now, looking at this landscape. And I think as we go forward, we'll be looking more and more, and especially around this integration piece, we'll be looking more, the third sector will get pulled into this probably a lot more.
Great, thanks, Yvonne. We have to we'll hold the questions there. Thanks to those of you who have put questions. I don't know if everyone is able to stay around for a little while at least, if anybody wants to follow up with any one-to-one questions for her. But very interesting talk, and if you show your appreciation for Yvonne Gallagher.